This is Brother Job. Welcome to Mr. G's Hard Truth Show. Today we're going to talk about Gen Z and how Gen Z speaks out. Today I have a special guest. Special guest, will you please say your first name and where you're from?
Hi, I'm Anaya, and I'm from Queens, New York, but I'm an ATL resident.
Okay. Shout
Mhm.
out to Queens. So now, Naya, how is it being part of Gen Z as a black woman in these days and times?
Great question. It's a roller coaster of emotions. Every day you wake up and things can be very elevated, but things can be very debilitating. I'm not quite sure how our society is going to treat us just day by day. So it's very stressful just being Gen Z and a black woman on top of that. Um, Me personally, I'm very proud of where we came as just a people. And I will tell you right now, I'm so happy to be alive and a part of this generation right now as a black woman. But
Okay.
I can't lie to you, it's been tough.
What are some of the challenges that you find yourself going through?
Mm, well, already from the get go, as a black person, period, we're fighting to break out of these boxes that our society already put us in. Not just our society, but also our own community. We're a very limited culture, a very limited race, and it's so depressing in a way. So,
Hmm.
on top of that, then you have the aspect of being a woman. You have to fight out of another box. But then on top of that, you have the aspect of being Gen Z. And it's so sad, but we cannot lie. Gen Z has been negatively viewed forever, since Gen Z has been Gen Z. So there's been multiple boxes that people like me have to break out of just to get a fighting chance. It's tough, very tough.
So, yeah, it does sound like a lot of obstacles. Where do you find the strength to even be able to push through all of that? You know?
Yes. Well, I would say it's definitely spiritual. I
Mm,
could tell you this. I'm so proud being black because from the get go, I just think it's in all of us, just as black people. We're a resilient people. So that was never an option. Giving up has just never been an option. Um, I have never been taught to give up by anyone, especially my parents. So that's a great question. I just think um as a culture, that's just something we haven't done yet. And that's just my parameters. I think it's my nature. I get up every day, and by nature, I just already have the strength to continue.
that's fair. That's a good answer. That's great. I'm glad you're resilient. You don't give up. You got a lot of fight in you. What's the difference between the generation before and behind you? Do you see from your perspective?
The generation before me, millennials, and the generation after me, I think is Gen Alpha. Whew, well, I have relatives, I have siblings that are millennials, and I have siblings that's Gen Alpha. Um, there's big differences. I would say as Gen Z, we have a lot in common with millennials. The difference is just time. I feel like Gen Z, we have been put through a lot of trauma, back to
Mhm.
back trauma. And just personally, as someone a part of Gen Z, I noticed these traumas, going through an epidemic, these political fights, um, how so many things we used to fight so long to demonize is being normalized again. Speaking as a Gen Z, I would say we definitely have it. I don't want to say harder because that's per opinion. but
Yeah.
we don't have enough room. I think other generations like millennials, um, they don't give us credit, as much credit as generations before us. We're not given room to thrive. We're never given the benefit of the doubt, basically.
Mm. And where do you
Mm.
think that stems from?
Mm. Well, there's multiple reasons for that, but something that I realize is the generations before me, not even just millennials, because again, I'm an early 2000s baby, so I'm very closely on the mark of being a millennial. So I myself have more in common with a millennial than actually I would have in common with a person in my own generation, just born a little bit later. But having these conversations with other Gen Zs and millennials, we do see that a lot of this envy is almost that envy comes from generations before even millennials. And
Yeah.
I get it because it was a different time. Things were just simply, I won't say easier, but goals were more attainable. Being in this generation now, every day, this society is almost clamping up on itself. It's an implosion. Opportunities are thinner. So there is a disconnect between the generations prior who kind of don't understand. They can't comprehend why Gen Z act the way they do.
Okay. Has there been any attempts to get the other generations to understand? Do you think that the voice is loud enough for people to hear exactly where you're coming from or your perspective on how life is for you?
Oh, definitely. I am really proud of my generation in so many ways. The stats are in, and I think we are just, our eyes are so much more open than it was just a couple years ago. Um, Things that used to grip our generations so tightly, we have just simply gotten up and stand 10 toes down as a generation and said, no, we want more from us. And as a child of someone from a different generation and just being a part of multi-generational family, there has been minty arguments about just topics like that. And I do see a disconnect. And I do see that people constantly try to have that conversation. But me, I realize talk is cheap. And I see a lot of other Gen Zs realizing that too. So our actions is enough. Sometimes reaching out, that's one aspect, but just showing what you're capable of, that's the whole thing. And us as a Gen Z, that's what we do. We show out and we show what we're capable of. And time after time again, we prove to the naysayers and the doubters that we are a capable generation and that the future is very bright.
Hmm.
Hmm.
That's powerful. I'm glad you're speaking out and taking a stance and letting people know where you stand. Now, when it comes to education, when it comes to moving forward with the future, do you feel like AI has taken away from um, some of the opportunities for your generation?
Um, yes, AI is not just an attack on Gen Z, but Gen Z is sort of the first point of contact of the negative effects of AI. Gen
Mm,
Z is like literally, we're seeing it play out in our generation. And AI has taken away so much. But as a person who is creatively inclined, AI has taken originality. AI has taken and robbed originality. And it is so apparent just the day by day. You cannot escape it. AI has definitely in itself is a disease that has
mm.
affected our generation and many more generations to come.
Yeah, that was
Hmm.
That was a lot to process. And
Yep.
and the reason why I'm saying that is because you're directly affected by it.
Mhm.
People in my generation, we're pre internet generation. Apple just came in, Commodore just came in, things of that nature were just kicking in, and we knew how to survive without a cell phone, right? We could remember numbers. Um, we would have to actually show up and be at a place. Now you have virtual meeting spaces like where we're on now. Very different, and I believe the elders would say it was a lot different for them than it was for us. So I get it,
Mhm.
right? But us being able to communicate like this bridges that gap between all generations, to get a better understanding. Because as one, we are a whole community, and we need to understand where each and every one of us stands at. So, we could keep the generational wisdom flowing,
1,000%. One
right?
1,000%.
So with that being said, we talked a little bit about this, a little bit about that. What does the dating scene look like for you Gen Zs?
Oh, I think a little bit more bleak than AI. I'm not gonna lie. If we're talking about if we're talking about dating, um, there is a change. There has been a real shift, and it's something very interesting. You mentioned how you was a part of a generation before internet. I'm an early 2000s baby, so actually, when I was in my childhood, internet was very new too. I would say the extent was a big, big blocky computer. Um, I had a childhood outside, so that enriched me. But I do see the difference compared to someone with that type of childhood and someone with a childhood that is just surrounded by social media and the internet in my generation. And that has definitely impacted the dating scene. Social media has essentially corrupted the dating scene. And social media has made our men and women so insecure, so filled with sadness and rage. It's a huge topic. Social media has become a quick way to spread insecurities and negativity. Social media itself isn't even the problem, but it's that access. That's the thing about evolving. The being able to access that knowledge faster is kind of a double-edged sword. But with dating, in my generation, it's almost impossible. It's a very daunting task, especially being a woman of color in the political state, in the climate. Yeah, I would say it's a stark contrast between just a couple years ago.
Okay. Thank you for that information. For those
Mhm.
viewers who are unfamiliar with what it may appear like or what it looks like from the perspective of a Gen Z, here you go, right here on the hard truth. She shared with you guys. Um, hmm.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think of one more question to kind of close us out for this segment and get us prepared for number two, for
number
part
two.
two. And the question is racism still present amongst Gen Zs?
Let me tell you, love this question. Racism is forever going to be present amongst every generation that has prior and will come. It just evolves. It absolutely evolves, and now probably the past 5-ish, 4-ish years, not to be specific what happened during that time, but I know a lot of people can guess. Racism has People has been very comfortable in their racism. People have been just very outwards with it. You can't escape it. You can't even enjoy day by days by it. People don't care anymore. But just a couple years before that, racism was a little quiet, but it's always been in the backdrop. If there is a difference between one and another, there will be racism. That is our human dilemma. We can all look alike, but someone might have an innie and the other person might have an outie belly button. There will always be racism. It just changed. And for Gen Z, our racism has hopped on the internet and it has gotten more complex in its way. And in a way, it's so much more scarier because how it indoctrinates people is at an alarming rate. It's not as crude and brutal as the racism was just a couple generations before, but it's still there and it's still highly impactful. It's just taken a silent backdrop. And racists have just become smarter and racists have become better at being chameleons. You can
Mm,
interact with racists day by day. These racists aren't just these people we perceive them as. And as a generation that has always been put in a box, the worst thing you can do is perceive anybody in a specific way. I think people think of racists, they like, oh yeah, hillbilly, country, gun wielding, toting. But actually, it can be your doctor, it can be your roommate, it can be anyone.
mm.
Racism is a chameleon, and racism is still very much alive, still very much strong, and it still very much is here.
Okay, well, you heard it first here on Mr. G's Hard Truth. Thank you, Anaya, for sharing and speaking up on Gen Z's behalf. If people wanted to follow you or know where to contact you at, where could they do that at?
Lynn is in on TikTok. You can follow me there.
Okay, Lynn is in on TikTok. So be sure to follow. Thank you for being a guest, and we'll be looking forward to part two. All right.
You
Have a good one. Thank you.
have a good one.
Be
Bye.
kind, travel in harmony. Peace.
Peace.